Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the book launch of And the People Stayed Home by Kitty O'Mara, hosted by Books and Books in Miami. And thank you to Books and Books. We're so thrilled to be doing this book launch with you. And of course, we wish we could be there in person. We're pre-recording this conversation, but we're very grateful that Books and Books is continuing its amazing programming during this time. And in many ways, that's what this book is about. I'm Andrea Gollin. I'm the managing editor of Tra Publishing, which is the publisher of this book. And I'm here with Kitty O'Mara, who's the author. Hello, Kitty, and welcome.
Hi, Andrea. It's good to see you.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you. And it's really great to be here talking about the book launch, which we've been working towards for so many months now. So it's pretty exciting that going from, as I'll discuss with people, from your poem being a viral poem on the internet to it being a book has been a journey for both of us, I think.
Yes, it really has.
So I'm in Miami, Kitty is in Wisconsin. Obviously, we're on Zoom together, and I'm going to say a few words about the book, and then Kitty will read it and we'll share the illustrations with you so you can all see it. And then after that, Kitty and I will have a conversation about the book, and we'll answer some questions that have been sent in advance.
Good.
What I'm really looking forward to in this conversation is just continuing a conversation that we've been having, it seems, over several months through some of the interviews we've done for the book, through our emails. It's just seems like it's never enough. And so I'm glad we can share what we've been talking about with people. So to talk about the book, And the People Stayed Home is a picture book for both children and readers of all ages. We see it as a family book, a book that can appeal to people from ages 0 to 99. And it's about, in many ways, the unusual times we're in, but it's also a timeless book. The words of the book are a poem that Kitty wrote in the very early days of the coronavirus pandemic. It was Friday, March 13th, which does seem like an interesting day and date. And she wrote about her hopes for this time, and especially her hopes that we not only use this time wisely, but that it become a healing time for people and for the planet. And after she wrote it, she posted it on Facebook, and it exploded. It went viral, and it's reached people all over the planet and has touched them in very profound ways. So dozens of people, or probably hundreds by now, have set it to music, have created dances around it, have made videos, have made artwork based on the words. Some of the many highlights have been that composer John Corigliano created a piece that Renee Fleming has sang a few times now, including at the Metropolitan Opera. It's included on an album that's being released in November by the Gabriel Alegria Afro-Peruvian Sextet, where Kitty read the poem in both English and Spanish. And there's been so many other amazing events. The Oprah magazine has called Kitty the poet laureate of the pandemic. And the story, very briefly, behind the book is that at Tra Publishing, our publisher, Alona Oppenheim, saw the poem and she loved it and she thought it could be a book. And we contacted Kitty, and the idea was we produced the book very quickly. It has illustrations by Stefano, Cristofaro, and Paul Pereda. And we're just thrilled by the early reactions to this book. Launch date is November 10th. And we've also partnered with Vooks.com, which does an animated read-along version of the book that's available on their website. You can learn more about the book at its website, which I'll repeat again, but it's andthepeoplestayedhomebook.com, where you can read all about the book, order it. You can, of course, order it from your local independent bookstores, and there's a teacher's guide as well. So I'd like to just say a few words to introduce Kitty before we get to the book. Kitty O'Mara lives near Madison, Wisconsin, with her husband, Philip Hagerdorn, and their 5 rescue dogs, 3 cats, gardens, and many, many books. She's a former teacher of middle school writing and literature and a hospital and hospice chaplain. She's currently a spiritual director, and she's also a lifelong writer and artist. And the People Stayed Home is her first print book, and you can read more of her writing on her blog, which is called The Daily Round. So Kitty, before we discuss the poem and the book and everything you've been up to, we do want you to read it, and I'll share my screen while you do read it, and I'll go through the pages as you read. So I'm just going to pull up the book right now and share it. So this is the cover of the book, and Kitty, if you could start reading, it would be great.
And the people stayed home. And they listened and read books and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still. And they listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows. And the people began to think differently. And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed, and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses. And made new choices. And dreamed new images. And created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed.
Thank you so much, Kitty. And the book, after the last page of the book, we have an interview with Kitty. And again, just reminding you that this is where you can learn more is andthepeoplestayedhomebook.com. So Kitty, thank you again for reading it and sharing it with everyone. So many things have happened since you first wrote that poem. And I want to go back to the beginning. Do you remember what you were thinking about? What led you to write the poem?
You know, I have a background in education and in healing, being with people in their healing and facilitating it through their own inner knowledge and awareness. So those things concern me greatly. And I'm passionate about the earth and have been probably, from neonate on. I love everything about being outside and working with the earth and loving it, just appreciating it. All of those things were kind of in me when my husband and I uh, decided that it was time for us to go into quarantine, which was earlier, I think, than some people were doing it. But my background at the hospital and his being a science teacher, we knew what was coming and thought it was wiser to do that earlier than not. So we did. And I was worried about my friends in the hospital. I knew they'd all be called into service in ways that even they hadn't prior. They were going from all departments to ICU and ER to help with this virus. And of course, we've all had viral and pandemic training, but when it happens, it's very different. And, I was worried about the PPE availability and just everything. So I sat down and I wrote, and I think it was just metaphor, symbol, desire, inspiration, a lot of things mixing together. And it just kind of came out, and I put it on Facebook for my friends. And that night, a friend said, "May I share it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." Sorry about that. The dogs are here.
That's okay.
And so she did. She shared it, and a few days later, my husband saw it on his feed, and it had been posted by one of his former students that, a person whom I didn't know. And so then we kind of figured out something was happening. And the next morning, Deepak Chopra made a video of it on a Facebook page he has. So then we kind of figured it out, and were quickly overwhelmed by the velocity of going viral.
Yeah, once Deepak Chopra reads it on Facebook, it's it's gone viral, and
Yeah.
and it seems like it just really took on a life of its own in so many ways. So
Yeah.
after that happened, just people all over the world started um,
Uh-huh.
contact you, people from not just the US, but everywhere, Europe,
Oh no.
Africa, India.
Everywhere.
What has that been like?
Yeah, I think every continent and most countries. I had discontinued my blog a few years prior due to some health issues I wanted to focus on, and then was just kind of lazy about starting it up again. And friends and family, especially Philip, were at me to kind of start it up again. We like your writing with your photographs, do it again, do it again. And I thought, okay, well, this must be the time. I'm in quarantine, I can't serve in any of the ways I'm used to with touch and presence, but I could write again. And so the first new post was the poem a couple days after I had put it on Facebook. And I immediately, the feedback on the blog was just stunning. It was stunning. And the stories were profoundly touching and humbling. And then you contacted me, and we talked about the possibility of a picture book. So many other artists did as well, as you've mentioned. But this was close to my heart because I've been a writer since I was about 6, and because I love children, and I thought this was a beautiful way to convey the message of the poem to children.
Um, Okay, and we're talking right now in early November when many parts of
Right.
the US are experiencing what's being called a second wave. Um, when we first started working on the book and we started looking at the timeline, we thought that when the book
Mhm.
came out, we would not be sheltering in place, that this would be kind of a memory. I mean,
Mm,
that was our hope, at least, which is not the case. Our lives are
mm,
still circumscribed in a lot of ways by this situation. And of course, the illness and the loss is devastating. Um, but there are some positive aspects to it. And in your poem, you do write about possible good things about this time and what might possibly come out of it that could be good in the future. So I'm hoping you can kind of discuss and expand on some of those positive aspects.
So I'm a person that every year prior to this past one has taken time for a what's called a retreat, a spiritual retreat, and I go to a retreat center where I have agreed to be silent for 10 days, other than meeting with sort of a guide every day. Um, and that time is extremely precious to me every year for setting my clock, my spiritual clock, and rebalancing everything, all the stimulus of the past year, all the events and experiences, the responses, especially surrounding, of course, my relationships with what I consider to be sacred in my life. Um, and this time of quarantine, I felt sort of afforded those of us able to stay at home because of our situation in life, but also because we were being asked to do so for the safety of everyone else who needed to be out there working. Um, and I thought, okay, so what do we do with this time? Well, as a teacher who always said, use your gifts, I felt the biggest thing we could do was explore our gifts. There are things that many of us um, enjoy doing or always wanted to do, and yet because of life and its responsibilities, we tell ourselves later, I'll do that later. Maybe next summer I can do that, or maybe after this I can do that, or maybe then, or I will, or whatever. And we don't do them. So I thought, okay, here we are. We're given the gift of this time. Let's do it, and let's create. Another important word in my vocabulary, probably my favorite verb. Um, let's do new things with who we are as people and take ourselves deeper in relationship with ourselves and the people we love most dearly, and then we will have developed gifts that we can share, and certainly Zoom has become a great way to do that. But we'll rejoin as a society and community, and I think we have the opportunity and can make the choice that when we do rejoin as community, we are kinder people. We are people more aware of our gifts and more ready to share them. And I think that's where the poem came from.
Um, okay, and I'm always really curious when you talk about it. Um, the idea of people using their gifts or people not being a bit out of touch possibly with their gifts.
Mhm.
I think it seems like from talking to you previously and from my understanding that you believe that in certain ways our lives pre-pandemic were not always serving us well, and certainly in this area of using our gifts were not necessarily serving us well. So I'm just curious about what you feel gets in the way of people using their gifts and how you feel they can become more in touch with what they have to offer in that way.
Yeah, well, it's deep listening to your heart and understanding that from my point of view, we're all here to share the best of ourselves. Some people are quickly and deeply compassionate in their relationships. Some people can convey in words what others of us wish we could share. Some people can paint and create artworks that speak profoundly to our hearts and our emotions. Some people are very good at managing and directing and organizing. Every single thing is a gift, and I don't think we have just one. But I do think sometimes as we go through school and life and try to belong and fit into our culture, that those special things about us aren't as valued and as groomed and nurtured as they could be. And I think they need to be. I think we need to widen the scope of what success means, and make invitations to each other and appreciate in each other that inherent value of being human, and uniquely so.
Yeah, and so I'm curious about, well, that leads to two questions. One is for yourself.
Mhm.
You know, you started your blog again after a period of not keeping it going. Do you feel like this time has been serving you in that way of allowing you to explore your gifts and develop them? And
yeah, and I wasn't not I don't think attending to them when I didn't have a blog. I was still doing it. I just wasn't publishing it. But yes, you know, I think the combination of my words and my photography is uniquely satisfying to me. You know, as is putzing around in the kitchen and creating things, and certainly gardening. All of those I have been able to do while in quarantine. And again, I am very grateful because I know that isn't the case with many people. But yes, I think there has been deeply, for me, again, I will use the word sacred, invitation in this. And it has been a journey in creating this book and in having this poem go viral that, of course, I never expected. You can't strategize and manufacture that. It happens, and you see the invitation and say yes as much as you can, and know if you have to, and ride with it. But it's made this entire journey since the beginning of March very, very different for me than I had expected. And then I think it probably has been for many other people. And I try to be mindful of that and take it into consideration in my response to it.
And I'd also like to ask you, what is your advice to others? I don't know if people have been asking you advice about getting more in touch with their gifts if they don't know what they are, um, or or cultivating them when they might feel not confident about it.
Right. No, this is work I did a lot with my heart patients. Sometimes disease is part of the process of going back to recover our gifts and explore them. And it's healing, which is, as you know, another very important concept in who I am and what I think the world needs. We all do, and can offer ourselves and others. So yeah, how do you get in touch with your gifts? Well, what is it that gets your heart beating joyfully? What is it that when you do it, time is irrelevant and in fact vanishes, and someone might interrupt at some point and say, you know, it's dinner time, it's lunchtime, you know, you've been here for 4 hours now, and you have no concept of that. And so that's a good clue that you have a passion, and those passions need to be given that kind of time and attention, because they're uniquely part of you and why you're here. What gives you delight? It doesn't have to be something that makes money. It doesn't have to be something that you know, puts you on a pedestal above all others who do whatever it is this is. It's something that gives you joy. You know, that's what you need to do. Feed it.
Okay, okay, thank you. And
Oh, and you know, another thing, Andrea, is sometimes people don't recognize their gifts because there's so much a part of them that they don't understand other people don't have the same gift. You know, it's easy for me to go, it's just a little thing I wrote. It's very easy for me to do that about everything I've ever written, the ones I've worked on for hours and hours, and things I've dashed off that have gone viral. You know, it's easy for me to go, what? But that's not fair. When you have a gift, you have to know it is something that doesn't come easily, perhaps, for other people. It comes easily to you. And that's why you need to explore it and take it deeper.
that I think that's such a good point, that we often don't value what comes easily.
Right.
It takes sometimes years to realize that it comes easily because maybe we're meant to do it.
Right.
I'm also curious, it's about 8 months since you've written the poem.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like, how do you feel about it now? In terms of, do you feel, here's what you said to me one time is, the virus brings sickness, but we can choose to be more alive than ever. And that's a sentence that's really stuck with me ever since you said it. I'm curious about whether you feel like we're making that choice. How you feel about how we've been responding to this time.
I think some people have chosen to continue creating and take their gifts deeper. And I think others have allowed fear and impatience and anger to overwhelm them. Cognizant of the fact that many people are faced with great struggle during this time, the emotional response in many places to me has shown, well, you know, when people are under stress, they regress. That's a very common occurrence, and we all do it. We go back to behaviors and choices, and a lot of this is unconscious, but, you know, we become the 3-year-old. We become the 4-year-old, we become the angry adolescent, we become the me, my kind of human again. And when we become conscious of our choices and behaviors, we can choose differently. I understand the fear, I understand the frustration. I have not been off, you know, the little bit of yard we live on here, but twice since the beginning of March. So it's not easy, it's hard. We are all curtailed and confined in ways that challenge us, and some more so than others. And as I say again, and I really want to emphasize, there are people who have to be out there working. They have to be out there working for all of our welfare. They have to be out working for the welfare of their family, for their rent, their food. I understand that. You know, we're all in different places. I'm retired. So I don't have a job anymore to go to. I did for decades. Now I don't. You know, it's all different for all of us. And I think if we recognize that, if we recognize that there is heartbreak and loss and grief in every single human's life, and maybe more so now than ever, then we draw on the compassion that's in us and we offer love to ourselves and to those outside of ourselves, more deeply and profoundly. I don't think we're doing as well at that as a race, as a species, as we could be right now. I think too many are giving in to the anger, the fear, the grief, and letting that all get mixed up and come out the way it would in an unevolved way. And I think we can do better. And many have, many have been showing us unbelievable acts of compassion and love. And I think those should be the lights we look to.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And it really brings me kind of circling back to the point. And in the poem, you mentioned listening, a few times, and you've talked about it. In the poem, you actually mention listening as a way to connect deeper. I'm wondering if you can expand on what you mean by listening, because it seems like it's so connected to what you're just talking about.
Yeah. And as a teacher and a chaplain, I've studied listening. So I'm really fortunate that way. I also think it's one of my gifts when we talk about people's gifts. But what I mean by listening is to agree that we are an anxious species in a very anxious world. There are always more demands on our time and attention than we can serve. And we have to make this conscious choice to part the way for ourselves and say, this time is dedicated to my own heart, my own well-being, my own spirit, all the different ways that can be understood. And that's what meditation and contemplation and centering prayer and any prayer are kind of, to me, all about. And that is that listening, just shutting off the talking and the sound and the noise and letting the world or our God or the divine and sacred or the universe, whatever that is for us, speak to us. Let us take it in for a moment. And then bring that awareness to the people around us, especially the people we love the most, because they're the easiest, I think, to disregard, blow off, see as an impediment to what we're trying to get done here. I love you. Now get out of my way so I can do what I have to do today. That's not what we mean. And that's not what we intend. And that is not how we best love. And so listening when you're sitting with someone is a conscious and continual process of hearing your own inner movements and kind of pushing them aside with compassion, just pushing them aside, and to keep refocusing on the one who is in front of you or the family gathered around the table. Hear your own responses, kind of move them aside and focus again on the one who is speaking so that you begin to pick up what is not being said. How are the facial expressions and the body expressions sending me a message? How are the choices of words sending me a message? Is there doubt? Is there loss? Is there grief? Is there, whatever is going on? How can I love this person more fully by the way I am present to him or her? That's what I mean by listening more deeply. And it's an art, and it is a practice, and it's a choice, and it's something that we can become better at throughout our lives. The other important thing is then later, when we're back listening to ourselves, we can kind of review what our responses were to those to whom we had offered our presence. You know, I remember when, you know, he said this, I felt that. What was that about? And we can, you know, then we work on our own growth and capacity to love more deeply. It's a big thing. And it's forever.
Yeah, it's a continual practice, really.
Right. And then I guess I saw as what better than this time of confinement to work on that.
What is a typical day like for you during this
Yeah,
time?
yeah. What are my what?
What is a typical day like for you? What
Right.
are your days like during this time of quarantine or sheltering in place, rather?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they haven't really changed a lot because, as I said, we're both retired, and we're content to be home. It's not been a terrifically huge struggle because neither of us is expected to be anywhere else. There's no one depending on us to be anywhere else. So we do have 5 dogs and 3 cats and a lot of gardens. And so, you know, in spring, we got going with the gardens and tended them through the last few weeks when we had colder weather, and put them to bed for the winter. And now it's 70 degrees outside, so who knows what's going to happen. But eventually we'll go into winter, and so none of that has changed. There's a rhythm to our day that's dictated by the 4-leggeds, and you know, they want to get up at 5 or 6, and then we change time and they still want to get up, so now it's 4 or 5. You know, it's taking care of animals. They need to be walked, they need to have playtime, they need to be fed, they need to be separated at times. A lot of energy and attention goes to that, and that's great. And then there's kind of a quiet time of day when they're resting in their kennels and the cats have free range. And Philip loves to do things outside and in the wood shop, and I love then to write and explore my photography. You know, and we make meals and we celebrate, and a lot of things haven't changed that way.
Okay, and that actually brings me to this other question about daily lives, and we've talked about it a bit before in previous discussions, but it seems that you've mentioned in certain ways, if you are, you know, immersed in a working life in the US, that in certain ways that lifestyle has possibly not been serving us that well. I'm curious if you could comment on what you see as some of the ways that a typical our typical working life pre-pandemic was perhaps not serving us well, or perhaps not helping us cultivate what you see as, you know, the idea of cultivating our gifts or listening.
Right. Well, yeah. I think the first thing is that we buy into the gotta have kind of culture where we're working to earn money for the things we gotta have. So that's directionless and purposeless in terms of developing our gifts. Then we get a job, and it might even be one that does feed our gifts. And at least in my experience with education and certainly in healthcare, and prior to that, I worked in advertising and marketing myself as a young college graduate. It was always do more, do more, do more, do more, do more, do more, do more. And so you have these long lists and you're doing them. And for instance, healthcare has become this bizarre situation where, as a chaplain, what my purpose and value was, from my way of thinking, was to be present to patients who wanted to explore the journey of their illness and healing. But that came with meeting, and then chart. Now go visit a patient and chart. And, no one was pulling the camera back, or perhaps could, without, some kind of event like this, to say, wait a minute, what are we doing here with our gifts and our time? People aren't breathing into their gifts here, and therefore not offering them fully. And I think too many jobs have become, your value is the lists you cross off. It has nothing to do with the breathing, lively, artistic, creative moment you are offering another, and who also has the time to receive. And so, yeah, I don't think our culture is doing a very good job, or it certainly wasn't pre-pandemic. In a way, I think Zoom has helped. I really do. I think the more people working from home, although I understand there's hassles galore involved with that, but you also get to turn it off and be home, be with the people you love. And so much of life was about, Philip and I used to talk about this a lot, how bizarre it is to find the person with whom you want to spend your life. And then perhaps if you're blessed, create more people with whom you want to spend your life. And then, it's this get up at 5, get dressed, get a shower, get everyone out, off we go. And, then you're out there all day long. And then you come home exhausted and there's more to do. And then good night. And you kind of think, wait a minute, years are going by here. The children are growing, we're getting older, and we're not doing anything that matters in terms of how we love. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it's something I've been thinking about quite a lot too. It's interesting. Someone told me that they married their husband for 2 hours a day, and now they get them 24/7, and it's really been difficult. And I thought, wow, that's such an interesting thought. I'm still mulling it over.
Yeah. Well, and that's not to say that we shouldn't be out in the world being compassionate and creative and doing what we're here to do, as well. But does it really need to be, 80 hours a week? Because that isn't humanly possible.
Yeah, I remember when I, at my graduate school commencement speech, the speaker said, God did not invent the 40-hour work week. And he was really urging us to think about these things, but it does seem like our culture values, the more work you do, the more valued you kind of are, in a very twisted way. But
well, it is twisted because it feeds our lack of self-love. It feeds our lack of self-worth. It feeds our inability to face things about ourselves that perhaps need some attention and compassion. It's a lot easier to put it all out there and look, I'm valuable because I'm doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Instead of, look, I did one good thing today and I did it with everything I have to offer, whatever, you know what I mean? It's rewarding self-ignorance, and it does no good for us as a race of a human species, of beings on this planet. It certainly doesn't do any good for the earth.
Yeah, no, I think those are very, very important things to think about. And Kitty, my last question before I ask some questions that people have sent in is, what do you hope that readers kind of take away from this book, from your poem?
Yeah. Well, first, before I go any further, I do want to say um, that so much love went into this from the beginning. Um, Meeting the people at TRA, Ilona's vision, and then the vision of the artists, and then yours as it was all um, just joy for me. And so I think that's translated into the book itself. The illustrations and artwork, the way the words were translated into a co-creative, object we can hold and see, to me is nothing short of a miracle. And so I think that when you hold the book, uh, that washes over you. You want to slow down and see everything that was, you know, put into these illustrations. You want to enjoy the colors and the way the expressions and the details are there for you to enjoy. I think the words then become, the whole book is kind of like a meditation. And I think parents can enjoy it infinitely with their children. I think it's one of those, let's do it again because there's so much to see and hear. But I also think then the ideas of the poem can be, handled and explored by teachers and parents with their children. I like looking at it. I know there's a lot of adults like me who love books, and I just think this book is a gift, uh, a real gift. And I don't mean because I wrote it. I mean because it is a product of such amazing talent that worked together cohesively to offer it. It was exactly an example of using your gifts.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. It's always thrilling to hold a book in your hands after you've worked on it, but
Yes.
this one feels
Yes.
really particularly thrilling. And it's been such
Oh,
an honor to work on it during this time, to work on,
yeah. Yeah.
the poem is short, but it really is so thoughtful and
Yeah.
it really makes you think. And to do that during this time that has been a challenging time in so many ways, and to offer this to the world. And I know you've thought about it in such depth, but
Mhm.
it's been
Yeah.
a privilege. So thank you for writing the poem. And
Well, thank you. Thank everyone for helping.
thanks. And Kitty, I'm just going to share a few questions that people
Okay.
have sent in to us. One is,
Sure.
um, can you share your early beginnings as a writer with people? I know it was when you were young, but you had mentioned when you were about 6. But
Yeah. I wrote a lot of poems, a lot of fairy tales, and a lot of songs, which, poems, but then I started to set them to music that I made up and sang. And that really came from my daddy, who loved to play with words and sing silly songs and made them up. And I think, shared the genes and had a role model right there. And then Mama always read us fairy tales, and it just a lot of books. Books were hugely important in our lives. And so, visits to libraries and bookstores, those were just highlights growing up. And so I imitated because I liked reading. So I wanted to write books that were as fun as I thought they were as fun as what I was reading. And so that was my writing very early on. I think starting at about age 8, I started keeping a diary. Might have been 7 or 8. And then I think at 9 or 10, I read Anne Frank's diary, and that deeply influenced me because she called her diary Kitty. So I called mine Anne from then on. And I still keep a diary. I still keep keep a journal in that respect. But sometimes I still talk to Anne, my friend Anne. In high school, I wrote mostly poetry. In college, I wrote some fiction, still poetry. You know, and then essay form also became very important to me as something to write, both for myself and then eventually just in my little blog posts.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is very related, which is that as someone who's a writer and who has been a teacher of writing and literature as well, what advice do you have for getting kids more interested who might not be interested, getting kids interested in reading and in writing?
Right. So I was fortunate in the schools where I was a teacher that I could design the curriculum. It had to adhere to state standards, but I could choose all the novels and plays and poetry and myth. And I also taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So I could coordinate it in a way that I thought flowed in its challenge and theme and the things I wanted the kids to be exposed to. So that was a real blessing. And I think all teachers can do that to some degree, and certainly parents can do it as well. So you want to have things that appeal to boys, to girls, to this person, to that person, to all interests, that tackle some themes that are challenging, that will leave them questioning and exploring, that teach them about fact and opinion, but also deeper into symbol and metaphor. And whether you use those words or not, those are the things that you're trying to get kids interested in and exposed to. So I had, you know, Julie of the Wolves and Hatchet, two very similar stories, but one is with a girl protagonist, one is with a boy, and both involve a degree of survival in a element that, of course, because we have pretty severe, dramatic winters here, spoke to my kids. But then when you're teaching these things, what I had found worked very well was to integrate science, history, math, integrate artworks, music, movement, all of these ways that will deepen the experience of this book. So if we're reading about a pioneer, let's make the food the pioneer ate, and let's dress ourselves in clothing that closely resembles the constriction or whatever that those clothes can find. When we read a book about the Holocaust and people hiding in a small space, we took meter sticks and made a cube and got 6 people inside of it and said, okay, this is the space you have. How long could you stay in this space, do you think, and feel safe and peaceful? You know, so you try to integrate as much as you can with the word, so that when the kids are invited then to respond with their own words, they have exposed their senses much more widely to what was occurring in the piece you're reading or writing, than just reading or writing in response. You know, it's not just a head thing, it's now a heart and body and mind response. So I think as much as you can make things come alive and appeal to a wide variety of interest and gift, and then you allow the response to also be coming from a wide variety of techniques and gift, I think that gets kids excited about writing.
Yeah. I wish you had been one of my teachers, although I guess you kind of have been in these past several months.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh.
So that was it for the questions. Kitty, is there anything that you wanted to mention or to say to the people watching? Or and if not, I have one last question.
Oh, okay, I would say I do want to thank everyone that's responded kindly to me and the words I wrote. I want to tell everyone to be safe and to take good care of themselves during this time as best you can. I know it's hard. I know it's challenging. I want to say that I hold everyone in my heart and prayers.
Thank you so much. And
Create.
thank you everyone for coming and watching this with us. Thank you.